But yeah, thank you for inviting me to this wonderful gathering. Um, Iftikhar, Rupali, Sonal, and Sarah. How's the sound situation? Okay. And of course, Gloria and Phoebe and Daniel for doing all the, and Chris for all the logistics. And in fact, I'm particularly grateful because I've never really felt that I properly belong in these kind of snowballing conversations around climate change and environmental humanities. But I'm glad I was persuaded to come. I'm looking at Sona, as it's making me reflect on this feeling of distance. And of course, I've been learning a ton from all of you. So I am going to just first take a moment to try and situate what I'm doing in my current project on figurations of what we call nature in public spaces in contemporary India. Parks, gardens, theme parks, temple grounds, zoos, median strips, riverfronts, etc. So, a bit like Nayanika, I'm going to sort of beg your indulgence in doing a bit of disciplinary reflection here. And I'm still just figuring this out, so it would be great to hear from you if this isn't making sense or if I'm missing or reducing something. So okay, sorry, I keep the pictures going. So I'd suggest that there are broadly three ways in which art history and other interpretive disciplines like film or literature currently inhabit the climate change conversation. One is a kind of broad-based reckoning with climate change and environmental crisis as a ground for creative expression, where we now attend to ecology as part of the processes and contexts of making, circulation, and reception, including previously overlooked more than human actors. And these include weather, climate, dust, fog, landforms, topological features, places at various scales, animal, plants, and even cosmic beings. So this becomes effectively another lens for our attention to the objects of our disciplines: film, art, texts, architecture, etc. Now, there can be a tendency here to treat nature and culture as separate, pre-constituted domains, each influencing the other in accordance with the post-Enlightenment humanist epistemology undergirding the humanities, sorry, I missed that one, and kind of channeling the Christian nostalgia for the Garden of Eden that informs notions of wilderness. Thus, geological or climatic processes are often posited as givens in the analysis, effectively reifying the science. But if we're serious about taking a post-colonial, feminist, STS, and critical geography-informed approach, surely we want to interrogate this nature-culture binary rather than reinforcing it in our very method. And we've seen people do that, so I'm not saying everyone does. And perhaps this isn't such an issue when, as with much contemporary art, climate change or relations with the more than human are an explicit concern of makers themselves. So this informs a second approach, an eco-critical art history or criticism seeking to amplify resistant imaginaries and cosmopolitics, whether within the art world or in popular, folk, indigenous, and other forms. This enterprise is hugely important, but also risky, as spaces of resistance are shrinking and subject to intense pressure from political forces attempting to occupy, mold, or destroy them to their own ends. The romantic and neo-spiritual ends of this spectrum can shade into uncritical utopianism, settler moves to innocence, as Eve Tuck and Kei Wen Yang put it, and or compelling but dangerous forms of primordialism and essentialism. And this isn't helped by the careless universalist hubris of powerful, eco-critical, and putatively decolonizing voices in the global north, like the art historian T.J. Demos, who cites Vandana Shiva even as he decries Modi. A third strand, in conversation with environmental history, treats artworks, films, literature, and spaces as archives of ecological processes. Too often, as no doubt we've all seen, this approach astonishingly forgets that it's dealing with mediated expression and not a transparent window onto reality, and therefore fails to address questions of voice, form, genre, and regimes of signification, even though that's precisely what we in the interpretive disciplines are best equipped to contribute. The more successful readings, however, as we have seen here, can illuminate political ecologies and what Latour calls nature cultures, that is, the co-constitutions of what we call culture and environment, placing this binary under erasure. So it's also listening to the morning's panel. I mean, it's also about kind of converting sensory, experiential kinds of attunements to unfolding processes into knowledge, right? It's a kind of almost a sort of data making, like what counts as knowledge, right? So this is my attempt in tracing vernacular regimes of figuring nature in India, which may gesture to kind of global discourses of ecology and environmentalism, but often exceed post-Enlightenment or post-Romantic logics of representation. So it's really like, what does it mean to figure here? But further, and here I'm kind of echoing Parismita, I also want to address the aesthetic as a register in which processes imbricated with climate change are initiated and legitimized, recognizing that politics unfolds via infrastructures of the sensible. Politicians and their cronies in business and or religion mess with monsoonal rivers, forests, agriculture, the atmosphere, flora and fauna, but also work in an aesthetico-ethical register. I mean, these are important aesthetic actors, is what I'm trying to say. Often with these very elements of nature to legitimize their acts. So they're also adding the spice, as Camelia put it. We humanists have the tools to analyze this. So I've been investigating these processes at selected sites across India where various forms of excess attend the staging of, nature now is always in the bunny ears, right? So, Lucknow as, oh, sorry, that's the cronies who are doing the conversion of, adding the spice. So one of my sites is Lucknow as the city of gardens and political monuments. An ashram in Mysore that holds world records for its bonsai garden and parrot garden and a few other things. An agricultural theme park in Kerala, and the tourist corridor around the Sardar Sarovar Dam on the Narmada River in Gujarat, also home to the Statue of Unity, the world's tallest statue, where multiple eco-themed attractions stretch for kilometers along the river and into the valley. And there's lots to be said about the corridor form, right, which is becoming a favored genre. So I'd like to use this last to briefly gesture at some of the patterns emerging from my fieldwork. So one is a kind of choreography of land that configures nature as a modality of ethical statecraft, drawing on a range of literary traditions and genealogies of park and garden making. 2 is a signifying regime that places natural elements, organic, natural, living elements, on a continuum with inorganic representations, rendering inoperative the differences between symbolic forms and living entities, and hence obviating the burden of realism. And 3, a contemporary assemblage of developmentalism and a retooled Brahminical cosmological hierarchy that unfolds in various modes: scientific, cosmological, primitivist, romantic, neo-spiritual. And there's a panoply of tools available here. So some super quick examples should provide a sense of what I mean. But first, a reminder that the Sardar Sarovar mega dam displaced at least 40,000 families. NGOs estimate more like 85,000, mostly Adivasis from the Tadvi, Bhil, and Rathwa communities. Massive opposition from the Narmada Bachao Andolan, NBA, forced the World Bank to pull its funding. So while Nehru founded the dam in 1961, it wasn't inaugurated until 2017 by Modi. The engineering township of Kevadia, encroaching on 6 unsubmerged villages during the dam's construction, is now a tourism development hub, rebranded Ekta Nagar, Unity Town. This has meant ongoing Adivasi dispossession. The Narmada Nigam has been fencing off farmlands and erecting signs declaring ownership, including by stealth during the COVID lockdown. So everyone was in their houses, they came and put up the barbed wire fences. The dispossessed can't claim compensation because unsubmerged villages aren't covered by the resettlement plan. So this is a kind of another situation of what Rohit called in situ exile, right? Many are now employed by the Statue of Unity Authority, or mushrooming hotels and informal services as casual labor or on precarious short-term contracts. So these are not government jobs. They're in partnership, public-private. And they are subject to intense surveillance lest they reorganize, though now they're too few and fragmented and state power too unchecked for that to be feasible. Most of the tourist attractions here somehow relate to nature. Hiking, biking, rafting, or helicoptering along the river, Narmada Maha Aarti, the Dino Trail, zoo, pet zone, nutrition park, and many gardens. The Valley of Flowers, Ekta Nursery, Aapka Miyawaki Forest, Cactus Garden, Butterfly Garden, a yantra-shaped maze garden, and an Arogyavan that showcases Hindu wellness systems, celebrates yoga, and frames nature in terms of care for the human body and connecting with the soul, completely eliding local lifeways. Nature figures here as an at once national and global good via a spectrum of genres: scientific, cosmological, primitivist, romantic, and Disney-esque, taking on an ethical charge in excess of the science to naturalize and legitimate Modi's techno-sacred governmentality. And this resonates with Gyan Prakash's observation about colonial science, whose, quote, functioning as a technology of colonial governance and as an ideology of improvement overshadowed its representation as a body of universal laws of nature. Here, both colonial techniques and pre-colonial cosmologies are retooled for internal territorial penetration. The Kevadia jungle safari, for instance, has scientific descriptions like any other zoo and showcases local crocodiles after failed attempts to remove them for the safety of the seaplanes. But also, Australian emus and South American alpacas are creatively placed in the same grassy enclosure. The guide driving the eco-friendly electric golf buggy providing the safari experience called this an instance of peaceful coexistence. The alpacas love chasing the emus around the enclosure. It's unclear whether the emus actually enjoy this. This animal lesson echoes the Jataka and Panchatantra tales, the latter intended to teach princes the principles of statecraft or niti. Both also inform Arabic and Persian animal fables and the Mughal idea of rule as sulh-i-kul, or peace with all, a paradise of plenty manifested in paintings and actual gardens. So Modi and the Gujarat Forest Department, forest people, as Rohit called them, following Mayavati and others, trace a lineage to Mughal and Nawabi gardens, as well as to Victorian-era parks aimed at public health. Here, ethical and scientific aspects of nature coexist, ultimately reflecting the benevolent, all-encompassing wisdom of the sovereign. In this sense, these attractions aren't reducible to Disneyfication, or rather they help us to rethink Disneyfication beyond the secular commodification of space via reified culture. For Disney too uses nature in the service of moral and ethical pedagogy, like the fables of Aesop and La Fontaine. And as with Disney, this ethical and pedagogical charge needn't be transmitted through organic living beings. If the Glow Garden renders nature entirely inorganic through its fabricated light sculptures, this is just one pole of a blurring and oscillation between organic nature and its inorganic representation throughout Ekta Nagar. The figuration of life teeming in the gardens firmly eschews the simulacrum of a primordial wilderness divorced from culture or human intervention. Take the cactus garden, whose exterior wall features colorful fake cacti along with our host and benefactor. Entering through a cactus gate, you see artificial cacti cohabiting with organic ones, and fountains lined with dolphin tiles, or stairs with bird tiles flanked by photographic cacti. More cactus photos adorn the gift shop, whose concrete pillars feature tiles with photographic stones. You can be photographed with your face in a cactus or under a selfie caption with an image of the fake cactus entrance. This play of multi-layered representation continues in the zoomorphic topiary and the animal dustbins, now ubiquitous in Indian parks. The mingling of organic and inorganic forms of nature continues throughout, at the butterfly garden, the Valley of Flowers, the zoo, including for the more than human viewer, these backdrops of the animals, even at the technological nutrition park. At night, nature turns electric as the roadsides and glow garden light up, along with the dam's sound-synced dancing laser beams. Crazy. All this isn't just common or garden greenwashing or anthropocentrism. Human anthropocentrism is a major ideological component of the destruction of life on the planet, but not the only one. Again, something scholars in the global north often overlook. It comes into assemblage with other forms of hierarchy and other kinds of enlightenment, that may not center the human or do so in ways other than humanism. For instance, a Brahminical cosmology whose ordering of beings perpetuates what Mukul Sharma calls eco-casteism. This plays into the at once evolutionary, developmental, and cosmological framing of the area's Adivasi people throughout the tourist experience, and their erasure as the area's existing inhabitants, even as they're conscripted into staging its attractions, both as workers and as exhibits in themselves. Here again, symbolic and organic beings are interconvertible. The figuration of Adivasi communities at Ekta Nagar variously subjects them to unreconstructed colonial-style ethnographic narratives, a crude fantastical primitivism along with other indigenous peoples. And notice that there's a guy there who looks a lot like Nehru, or elision through incorporation into a reified, homogeneous tribal culture, which includes, as you can see on the right, that old tribal favorite, Man Ki Baat. So, and very much modeled on the Varli, very identifiable idiom. So all this serves to either consign them to a phantasmatic elsewhere or to conscript them into the developmental narrative of Ekta Nagar. Thus, the Statue of Unity Museum stages them alongside the area's flora and fauna on the one hand, and developmentalist resettlement propaganda on the other. This development has a civilizational and Sanskritizing aspect, for it has included taking Adivasi guides to Banaras to literally learn Sanskrit so they can greet the VIPs in Sanskrit. The tribal cafe, oh, sorry, this is one of the guides who was taken to learn Sanskrit. The tribal cafe, whose Adivasi personnel wear tricolor saris, serves exclusively vegetarian meals. Adivasi youth were sent to Kanchipuram, the Banaras of the south, to learn to weave temple saris to sell in the Ekta Mall, because apparently they have no crafts of their own. An NGO runs a vocational training center with classes in plumbing, electrical work, driving, tailoring, and hospitality. Note, not a university. This bid to civilize and develop putatively primitive people while also keeping them in their place echoes colonial projects across the globe, but it also reinforces the logics of caste. Ekta Nagar then forges a brave new world that's both primordially eco-friendly and technologically globalized, celebrating a phantasmatic indigeneity while also systematically transforming indigenous lifeways through development, Sanskritization, and dispossession. Ekta Nagar's remaking of space is also a remaking of time, because it consigns existing ecological and cosmological life worlds not only to an elsewhere, but also to oblivion, to forgetting. Writing of the archive, Achille Mbembe describes state power as created by an act of chronophagy, a swallowing up of time that serves to, quote, abolish the archive and anesthetize the past. This, he says, is a radical act because consuming the past makes it possible to be free from all debt. The constitutive violence of the state rests in the end on the possibility, which can never be dismissed, of refusing to recognize or to settle one or another debt. A final example from the archive of Ekta Nagar. A series of before and after billboards at the Kevadia Jungle Safari celebrates the area's transformation from a dam site to an ecological wonderland. Doubtless the point was to celebrate the project's speedy progress from a dumping ground for debris from the dam, from construction in May 2019, to aviaries and animal enclosures in October. But the effect of this binary formulation of before and after is to erase entirely the question of what came before this before. Before the dam, before the deluge. First, the deluge of state-controlled water, and then of state-orchestrated land and life. Here, the sovereign's utterance, après moi le déluge, refers not what to happens after he dies, but after he has risen. For this deluge is what he has unleashed. Thank you.